April 9, 2019. An Indian Army expedition is navigating a remote mountain pass in the Himalayas when they make a bizarre discovery, stumbling upon a series of massive tracks embedded in the crisp white snow. This diagram compares a standard human footprint directly next to the dimensions of those tracks, which measured an immense 32 inches long by 15 inches wide. That massive scale strictly rules out any known human or native animal in the region. The expedition team took photos and tweeted them to the world from the official Indian Army account, explicitly stating they had found the Yeti. Predictably, the scientific and cryptozoological communities exploded. That single public post shifted the entire conversation, providing official military documentation of a physical anomaly that demanded a rigorous modern investigation. But those 2019 tracks are only the latest entry in a remarkably long historical record. During his conquest in 326 BCE, Alexander the Great actually sent members of his army into the mountains to hunt down what locals called the Wild Man of the Snows. Centuries later, 7th century Tibetan folklore described a massive, hairy glacier beast. Within their religious beliefs, the creature acted as a spiritual protector of the sacred peaks, known for violently killing humans who encroached on its territory. For thousands of years, these stories were treated as legends about aggressive mountain spirits. Yet the consistency of the physical descriptions raises a fascinating biological question. What if early humans were not encountering ghosts, but a biological apex predator? At the turn of the 20th century, Western explorers began pushing into the harsh, isolated environments of the Himalayas. They started finding physical traces at extreme altitudes of 17,000 feet, elevating the myth to a forensic pursuit. In 1899, Scottish explorer Lawrence Waddell discovered giant tracks in the eternal snows. Then, in 1921, Charles Howard Berry and his rugged expedition team reported an actual visual sighting, a giant lumbering creature moving against the white horizon. When Howard Berry asked his local guides what he was looking at, they gave him a specific Tibetan name, the Mito Kongmi. Later, when interviewed by a journalist, Howard Berry relayed that exact name. Mito translates to wild, but the reporter made a crucial linguistic error, substituting it with mek, which means filthy. Thanks to that embellishment, the creature was printed in the international press as the Abominable Snowman. That linguistic accident hijacked the narrative. A localized biological mystery was permanently branded a sensationalized title, transforming it in the public eye into a cartoonish monster. To understand the reality behind the sightings, investigators had to broaden their scope past the Himalayas, looking across 1,500 miles of remote, interconnected Asian mountain ranges into China. In these distinct mountainous regions, parallel legends emerged of the Yeren, a giant wild man. The Yeren is notorious in Chinese folklore for highly specific violent behavioral traits, like catching victims in a bear hug and squeezing until they pass out. Culturally isolated populations across thousands of miles of Asia were consistently describing the exact same massive, aggressive bipedal hominid. That geographic consistency strongly points towards a shared physical reality rather than a coincidentally identical fairy tale. The search for hard scientific evidence eventually led away from the snow and into the bustling urban colonial setting of 1935 Hong Kong. There, Dutch anthropologist Ralph van Koningswald walked into a local medicine shop and made a startling discovery. He found a massive fossil being sold as a magical dragon's tooth, but looking closely at the sheer size and distinct ridges, van Koningswald immediately recognized it for what it actually was, a primate molar. By directly comparing the fossilized teeth and jawbone fragments to known human and ape structures, researchers were able to extrapolate the creature's dimensions. They identified an early, massive hominid species covered almost entirely in hair. This scale comparison chart illustrates what those dimensions actually mean. Based on the fossil record, this newly named species, Gigantopithecus, stood about 10 feet tall and weighed upwards of 1,200 pounds. The fossil evidence established a plausible biological candidate with the sheer physical mass required to account for the towering figures described in ancient Yeti legends. By the mid-20th century, scientists began using zoological analysis to connect the biological reality of Gigantopithecus back to the physical footprints found in the snow. British zoologists examined high-altitude track photos and created physical plaster molds. By analyzing the scale and hominid shape of the casts, they concluded the tracks were incompatible with the foot structure of a bear, pointing instead to a large bipedal primate. In 1977, anthropologist Grover Krantz took it a step further. Looking closely at the specific toe structure and the sheer width of these plaster casts, Krantz theorized that the prints precisely matched the expected bipedal biomechanics of a Gigantopithecus. Evaluated through that forensic lens, the footprints are forensically consistent with the expected tracks of a giant ancient primate. The current scientific consensus states that Gigantopithecus went extinct roughly 250,000 years ago, leaving a massive timeline gap between the physical fossils and modern track sightings. This leaves researchers with two surviving hypotheses. Either a relict population of Gigantopithecus adapted and survived in the extreme unmapped altitudes of the Himalayas, or the Yeti is a 250,000-year-old cultural memory passed down by early humans who shared the continent with them. Whether it is a living survivor hiding in the eternal snows, or an inherited evolutionary ghost story, the Yeti proves our deep psychological fascination with the idea that we might not be the only upright walking apes left on Earth.